Hey guys, welcome to our week 3 general meeting, and I'm Nina.
And Tiffany.
So how to become a paid member? First of all, you fill out a Google form and then you turn in your payment to our treasurer, Adriana, and then you get a stamp card and our exclusive PPS t-shirt.
So first we have our PTCB question of the week. This week's question is, which of the following federally funded healthcare programs covers inpatient hospital care? A, Medicare Part B, B, Medicare Part A, or C, Medicare Advantage, or D, Medicare Part D. You should be seeing a poll screen soon, and we'll just give you a few minutes to think about which one you want to guess. Okay, about 30 more seconds. Okay, and then we can move on to the answer. And the correct answer was B, Medicare Part A. So good job if you got that correct. So Medicare Part A is a federally funded healthcare program that pays for things including inpatient hospital care, skilled nursing care, and other home health care, whereas Medicare Part B is more for outpatient care. Medicare Advantage is for additional HMO or PPO coverage. And then finally, you're probably familiar with Medicare Part D if you work as a pharm tech, because this part of Medicare covers select prescription medications, medical supplies, and vaccinations.
So our week 2 general meeting recap. Thank you everyone who attended our week 2 general meeting, and we hope you enjoy playing games with us.
And thank you so much to everyone who came out to our 9th annual pre-pharmacy day. We hope you had a wonderful time listening to the speakers, student and school panels, and networking with your favorite pharmacy schools. And the first upcoming event we have is our week 3 after social, taking place after this general meeting. So please feel free to stick around after the meeting to play a game of Gartic Phone with us.
So the second upcoming event we have is our week 4 general meeting, which is gonna be on the next Wednesday from 6 to 7. It's gonna be on Zoom, and please come to learn about psychiatric pharmacy with Dr. Erin. And you can join us early at 5:45 to hang out and chat. Pay member will receive a stamp card for attending. And if you have any question, please feel free to contact our EVP, Brian. So another upcoming event we have a USC Virtual Visit. It's gonna be on Saturday, January 29th, the end of week 4. Unfortunately, it's gonna be on Zoom. And why you should come to our visit, our USC Virtual Visit, to learn about the program and to interact with the students and staff. And you can also learn about the admission process or any question that you can have. If you're interested, please fill out this Google form by Wednesday, January 26th. If you have any questions, contact our IVP, Michaela. Board challenge fundraiser. So we reached our first goal of $25. Thank you those who supported us, and you can support us at PPS at UCI. If you have any questions, please contact our EVP, Ryan, at his email. So the first volunteer opportunity we have is going to be the Step Up Tutoring. So you can choose your own schedule anytime you have time. It's going to be on Zoom. So it's like a great experience to provide children with low income backgrounds with tutoring and emotional support. No teaching experience required. If you're interested, please fill out this application, and pay member can receive a stamp by filling out the Google form by March 11th. If you have any questions or concern, please contact our volunteer coordinator, Zainab.
Another volunteer opportunity we have for you is Crisis Text Line. This is a great opportunity to not only work with remotely, but also help people in crisis by utilizing your active listening skills, as well as other soft skills. So if you would like to volunteer, please fill out the application. The link can be found on the slide or in our weekly emails. And paid members will receive a stamp for participating by filling out this Google form by March 11, 2022. And next we have our member of the week. Please welcome Bill Deacon.
Hi, everybody. Hope you're all doing well week 3. I know I got 2 midterms and a quiz this week, so I'm having fun. Hope you're all doing well too. Yeah, thank you. Thank you everybody in the chat. It's cool to be member of the week. It was a fun social last week. And thanks to all my supporters who helped me achieve this. All my PPS supporters and fans and family. Oh, sorry. I guess some of you might not know me. My name is Bill. I'm a 3rd year pharm sci major. I started out undeclared and then declared pharm sci after 1st year. Thank you, Sam. I'm looking forward to hopefully someday going back to campus. All right. I didn't prepare much, and I don't want to take away any more of our time for the great industry presentation. So maybe we should move on, unless you want me to say any more. I guess I'll just add this to my resume now.
Thank you so much, Bill, for telling us about yourself. We're going to go back one slide really quick. We do have a quick .rx podcast announcement before we move on to our industry, which our EVP Ryan will be telling you about.
All right, apologize for skipping a slide accidentally, but here we go. So our newest episode on the .rx podcast feature one of our dear PPS alum, Dr. Carolina Kapustova, who's currently also the president of End User and Pharmacy Alumni Chapter. So I work very closely with her. So she's currently at PGY1 in an acute care setting. So if you would like to learn more about what her experience is like, how did she grew up from like in the Czech Republic and her story immigrating to the US, and then finding out that pharmacy is her passion. This is a great episode for you to listen to. You can find our podcast in these 8 following platforms. And yeah, if you have any questions, just please feel free to reach out to me, your External Vice President, Ryan.
So stay connected with us through social media. any kind of like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Discord. Also our website, don't forget about that.
And have you ever wondered what it's like to have a career in the pharmaceutical industry? Today we have Dr. Masara Isa and Dr. Mayan Do to help us explore industry. So please welcome them with a warm round of applause.
We can start our industry presentation. Thank you.
Okay, is Austin on yet?
I'm not sure. Let me just double check.
Because he said he called you and he's running a bit late from a doctor's appointment that he couldn't reschedule.
Okay.
But he is on his way, but he's going last, so it's probably fine.
Oh yeah. Okay. No problem. Okay. Just feel free to let him know that he can reach out to me anytime if there's any problems. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I guess we can just go ahead and get this started. And so I'm Mayan. Please call me Mayan. Don't call me Dr. Do. It's really weird. But today, so I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at AbbVie, formerly known as Allergan. So Masara, Austin, and I prepared a couple of slides just giving you an overview of the areas that we work in at AbbVie, and also what our roles, and then sort of what the drug development pipeline looks like at a big pharma company. So next slide, please. So I'll be going first since I work earliest in the drug pipeline. So just to give you a little bit of background about my journey so far. So I graduated from UC Berkeley in 2011, and I spent a couple of years as a lab technician at UCSF. And then in 2015, I went off to UC San Diego to get my PhD. And so I graduated just this past June in 2021. So right now I'm a postdoctoral fellow at AbbVie, like I just said, and I got this position through the USC School of Pharmacy. And so they have an industry fellowship program, which is really great if you want like sort of a foot in the door in industry right after getting your PharmD degree in the future, or PhD, whatever floats your boat. So next slide, please. And so currently at AbbVie, I work in the eye care research department. So that's what Allergan was really famous for. So specifically, I work in the dry eye disease area. And so I do a lot of like assay development and screening new compounds for treatment of dry eye disease. And so I've been in this position since July of last year. Next slide, please. And so I did my PhD at UCSD in biomedical sciences. And so this was a really big umbrella program where you can basically choose to do like whatever, you can work in whatever area of biology you want at UCSD. And so I chose to focus on ovarian cancer and developing antibody therapies for ovarian cancer. And I also worked in stem cell biology as well. And so I did like a combination of like cell culture work. I work with mice, I work with rats, all of that to develop hopefully drugs that'll make it to the clinic and hopefully to patients one day. Next slide, please. Ooh, it's not going. Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to give you a very general overview of how drug discovery works at a pharma company. Ooh, we're going backwards. So I work in basically the preclinical development part on the right and all of the steps before that. And so basically when we want to develop a new drug in pharma or at a biotech company, we have to identify what kind of disease we want to work in, and we have to identify a target that is relevant to that disease. So after we identify the target for the disease, we do usually like cell-based assays, like cell-based experiments, animal experiments, to determine if our target of interest actually has an effect on the disease. And so once we confirm that the target modulates the disease, we start generating compounds against the target. So when I say we, that doesn't mean me. It usually means like medicinal chemists who can actually like make small molecule compounds, or like protein engineers who can make antibodies. I cannot do those things, but I like to work with those people. So what I do is I basically work with these people to get like interesting candidates, and then I test them in usually cell culture models. And usually we have to test out a bunch of different forms of one drug to one target before we can identify a lead compound. And so once we identify that lead compound that looks the best so far in the cell culture models, we have to work with other departments, usually with the medicinal chemists and the protein engineers. So they have to basically tweak the drug just to optimize it so that it's both effective and safe in animal models. And so that sort of predicts how safe the drug will be in people, hopefully. And so we have to optimize the drug, and then we have to figure out how we're going to administer the drug. And so, for example, antibodies are usually administered intravenously, so through a vein, or it's going to be an oral drug that you can take like by a pill or something. And then we have to, after figuring out that, we have to optimize like what's the dose we're going to use in an animal model. And so the animal models we usually use are mice or rats, but we can also, like other people, not me, I'm just a rodent person at most. Other people work with higher species like rabbits, sometimes dogs and monkeys. And so once we establish like what's the dosage we're going to use, what's the animal model we're going to use to test that drug, we have to test those drugs in animals to basically determine like how safe is it, like are there bad side effects in the animals, and is it actually like improving the disease in the animal model. And so that basically takes me to the end of the preclinical development part. And Masara will talk to you guys more about the clinical trials part since she's in clinical development. So next slide, please. And so essentially what I do in eye care research at Abbey/Allergan is that lead compound identification to preclinical development. And so currently we're looking for new treatments for dry eye disease, because this dry eye is a tricky disease in that there are very few treatments available for patients right now. And the treatments that are available don't actually work in most patients. Like they address maybe 3% of the dry eye patient population. So it's really an area where there's an unmet need for new drugs for patients. And so my work mostly focuses on testing new drugs in the cell-based models, so like cell culture, as well in mice and rats. Click, please. Ooh. So that's fine, that's good. So I just wanted to give you guys a general career trajectory in preclinical research, biotech and pharma. Of course, the details are very dependent on which pharma or which biotech. And so I have a PhD, but by no means do you need a PhD to work in preclinical research. With a bachelor's or a master, you can essentially get to a senior scientist role, which is in the middle there. And so basically with a BS or MS, you would start out as an associate scientist. And after maybe like anywhere from 1 to 5 years, they'll promote you to scientist. And after 5 to 10 years, they'll promote you to senior scientist. Of course, the number of years it takes for promotion, it depends on the company. So where the PhD is beneficial is if you want to get into more leadership positions in preclinical research. And so principal scientists and directors, they don't do the hands-on bench work anymore. Like they don't have to deal with animals, they don't have to deal with cells and drug testing. And so they're still directly involved in the science and making the important decisions to get a drug from preclinical to clinical. But they mainly like oversee the project. They delegate tasks to their team members. And yeah, they make the big decisions. So that's the end of my slide. So Masara's up next.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayan. Hi, everyone. My name is Masara Isa, and I'm the current clinical development postdoc fellow at AbbVie. And so I'm going to start off with my journey and my path. And so I'm originally from San Diego. So you can hit next. Thank you. And for undergrad, I did go to UCI. So I'm a proud anteater. I graduated in 2016. I had majored in pharmaceutical sciences. And so obviously I knew all along that I wanted to go to pharmacy school. I knew I wanted to be in healthcare. And at that time, just according to academia, I felt that I always leaned more towards chemistry over biology. So I felt like pharmacy school was appropriate for me. I did take a gap year before applying to pharmacy schools. I knew I wanted to stay within California. And so during my 4th year of undergrad, that was my first exposure to actual pharmacy. I volunteered as a clerk in an independent pharmacy. And so I just observed what the pharmacists and the techs were doing, and I felt comfortable pursuing that career. And so if you can hit next. So I applied to pharmacy schools during my gap year in 2017, and I got into UC San Diego, which was really great for me. It's, back at home in San Diego, I got to go back. It also offered a really small class. So my class was about 60 students. So I was really happy with that. I had a really great time at UCSD. I obviously graduated last year in 2021. And so UCSD really pushes for a residency. And I remember from the very beginning, I felt that I worked a lot in undergrad trying to pursue pharmacy school. So I actually took it a little bit slower. I relaxed. I didn't really put in my mind that I wanted to pursue a residency once I graduated from pharmacy school. I just kind of wanted to take it slow and see where it takes me. And I just remember hearing a lot about industry. My school, as I said, pushes for residency, not much fellowships. And so I didn't really get much exposure to it. I would just hear about it every once in a while. And so during my P4 year, when I finally got on rotations, that's when I got exposed to industry. I was able to select 2 of my electives, secure them in industry. So I did a rotation at Legacy Allergan, which is AbbVie now. I did one in clinical development over there. And then my next rotation, I also got to do it at Pfizer in clinical pharmacology. And just being in the industry setting, I got really excited. I really felt like it really matched my ambition. I felt like there was no ceiling there. You could really learn and achieve more. And I really like the dynamic of working with a team with different types of people, working with people who had different credentials, such as PhDs, MDs, MS, or even people who have bachelor's degrees. And so I ended up applying to fellowships during my 4th year of pharmacy school. Next. And so I was lucky enough to secure a spot at AbbVie with Usc in clinical development, which is what I really loved about industry. I wanted to be a clinical scientist ever since I did my rotation at Legacy Allergan. And I was just really happy to land this position. And obviously it's in SoCal as well, so I got to stay around here. If you can hit next. And so with that said, I wanted to expose you a little bit more about clinical development, what it looks like, because, I for sure didn't know what clinical development was when I was an undergrad, and even most of pharmacy school, I wasn't really exposed to industry and the different areas within industry. And so for clinical development, we are responsible for taking a drug candidate through all 4 phases of clinical trials. And so I know that mine already covered discovery part, where you're working more in the lab, you're discovering a molecule, then you're testing it in different cell lines, then you're going to preclinical where you're testing it more in animals. And so once that's all done, you've established safety, and you've done obviously other types of studies. You get your IND, which is an investigational new application approved by the FDA. And so now you have this drug candidate that can actually go into the clinic and go into people. And so this is where clinical development comes in. You start off with your phase 1 trials. This is, first time putting it into people, so you want to make sure it's safe, and you want to make sure they're tolerating it. So that's kind of where we're also looking at different types of doses. And you do test it in healthy volunteers just so that you can detect any safety signals. Once that's been established, you feel like your candidate is safe, then you move on to a phase 2 trial. It's a little bit bigger, maybe a couple of hundreds of patients. You actually put it in the patients that you're testing the drug for, so the people who have the disease. This is where you're trying to establish proof of concept. So you're making sure now that the drug actually works. Once you get through that, then you move on to phase 3. So once you've established that your drug is efficacious, it's working, it's doing the job that it's meant to do, that's when you're actually confirming the efficacy. So that the drug is working, as well as you're looking for any other safety signals, because now you're actually testing it in a larger amount of people. So it can go up to hundreds and thousands of people. And so, once all that's completed, you have all of your information, all of these studies have been conducted, you feel comfortable, that's when you move on and you submit an NDA, which is a new drug application to the FDA if you're in the United States, and you're asking basically for approval of your drug to get on the market. Commercialization, which is like phase 4 trials, these are after your drug has been approved. There are a few other trials that you can also do while a drug is on the market. And I also wanted to highlight at the bottom where you see from discovery all the way to getting your drug approved, it does take a very long time. 10 to 15 years is the estimate. So that can be basically your entire career. A lot of people spend so much time in industry just seeing one drug candidate that they're working on, hoping that it actually hits the market. And a lot of money also goes into it. So there's an estimate of $2.6 billion all the way from discovery to getting your drug on the market. Down there, you also see $67.4 billion have been invested in research and development across all US companies. And that was an estimate from 2010. So a lot of energy, effort, and time goes to getting your drug on the market. Next slide, please. So what is the role of a pharmacist or a PharmD in clinical development? Every study that you're working on typically has 3 phases. You're first starting off with the study startup, then you move to conduct, and that's when your study is being, it's ongoing. And then lastly, you have your closeout. And so as a clinical scientist, when you're in clinical development, when you're in startup, you're responsible for the study design. So, you have a drug and you know which population you're working with. So you try to come up with ideas of how to design your trial. And obviously, when you're designing your clinical trial, you need to write all this up. So you're drafting a lot of documents. Those are key to your trial and how it's being carried out. You also need to figure out which sites, either around the US or around the world, that actually want to work with you so they can recruit those patients and put the drug in them. And so you need to evaluate if it's feasible to work with these people. You also need to train them on your study, on your protocol, and you need to make sure everything is going smoothly. So once that's all done, then you move on to study conduct. This is where you've activated all your sites around to carry out your study. Now you actually, as a clinical scientist, you want to monitor some activity. So you're looking to see if there are any safety signals, so any adverse events that are occurring in patients. You also want to look if there are protocol deviations, meaning that what you've written in the protocol, people are following it properly. And if they deviate away from it, then you might need to exclude these people from your study. You also are having a lot of data come in. So the sites are, entering all the information of the patients that they're working with, the subjects, and they're sending it out to you. So you need to make sure it's properly being documented, and you need to clean it as you go throughout the study. And then sometimes you also need to do site visits. So the sponsor, which is the company that's conducting the study, might need to go to these sites to make sure that they're documenting everything correctly, they're carrying out everything properly. So that's also part of your job. You need to strengthen your investigator and site relationships. So, you're working with these investigators, they need to make sure they're on board, that they're actually achieving timelines. So if they tell you they're going to recruit 50 patients by the end of the year, it's important for them to meet that, because as we saw on the last slide, you're investing a lot of money, a lot of time into this. You don't want any delays to occur. And that obviously having good relationship with these people ensures the quality of your data that you're getting from them. And lastly, that's where you have your closeout. So you have database locks, meaning that everything that you've received from the site, all the information, the data that you have, it needs to be cleaned up before you lock it, because once it's locked, you can't go back in there and change it. After that, that's when you generate this very large document called a clinical study report. So this document, it can be really large. I think the biggest one I've seen is like 3,000 pages, and it has everything that you've done throughout the study, all the analyses, all the results, all the side effects that you've detected. It's all recorded in there. You close out your site, and then you prepare all of your documents so you can submit it to the FDA or another regulatory body if you're in a different country. Next slide. So I know that might have been a lot, but a lot of people typically ask, what does day-to-day look like as a clinical scientist? So I just wanted to put here a few things that I do on a daily basis. What are my responsibilities? And so most of my days, I just go to meetings. If I'm not in meetings, then I typically try to block out some time on my calendar so that I can work on things that I need to deliver, whether they're long-term projects or just urgent matters. I just need to basically prioritize that on my own time if I'm not in a meeting. And so I do go to some preclinical meetings. So even though I'm not involved in the animal studies or any of the modeling that goes on before you give it to people, I still go to these meetings, because once that drug is ready to go into the clinic, I need to know how I'm going to approach the study. How are we going to design the study? I go to clinical meetings, which obviously, if there's an ongoing study, I need to support that. I try to clean up the data as it comes through, which I talked about earlier. Query management, meaning that I send all these notices to different sites if I detect any issues. And then lastly, I also have some side projects such as artificial intelligence and machine learning projects. Since I'm in eye care, there's a lot of images, and typically we can use that to our advantage to do some AI and machine learning and develop some models. So that's my portion, and we can move on to Austin next.
Thanks, Masara, for giving a background on the clinical development program. So for everyone, hi everyone. My name is Austin Mullins, and I'm the Evidence Solutions Postdoctoral Fellow, which is under the Medical Affairs Department here at AbbVie. And so I just wanted to, before I dive into medical affairs and give you guys a background about medical affairs, I wanted to kind of highlight my journey into this postdoctoral fellowship with AbbVie. So I graduated from high school and went directly to the University of Dayton, which is a small school in Dayton, Ohio, for my undergrad, where I obtained my bachelor's in pre-medicine, which essentially was a biology degree with a biomedical focus. And I knew going in my undergrad academic career, I knew I wanted to go into some sort of scientific professional school. And throughout pharmacy, or throughout my undergrad, I explored the different career routes, primarily med school and pharmacy school, and ultimately decided to pursue pharmacy school, and which led me to, in 2017, getting accepted into Ohio State for pharmacy school and attending OSU at their College of Pharmacy. And I came in not really knowing what I wanted to do, thinking I wanted to go that residency route and go clinical pharmacy and work in a hospital and specialize in oncology. But when I very early on got involved in some professional organizations, which you'll see here in a couple of slides, that introduced me to these non-traditional career routes for pharmacists, with the industry being one of them. And that really piqued my interest, and I catered most of my experiences through the rest of pharmacy school for the industry or a managed care, which would be an insurance company, to get those experiences to set myself up for a fellowship, because I early on knew I wanted to pursue a fellowship. So that leads me to my third year of pharmacy school, where I was able to obtain a clinical research internship, which was for a small medical device company. And they had one product that they had in essentially their phase 2 product, as you saw in Masara's path of FDA approvals. They were kind of in the middle, early phases of assessing efficacy and then robust safety data for their product. And that gave me a really good look into medical affairs and what our medical affairs teams does, but also a little bit of clinical development, which ultimately led me to pursuing this medical affairs fellowship and landing this role with Usc and AbbVie. And next slide, please. And just, I wanted to highlight, because I mentioned the involvement that kind of introduced me to the pharmaceutical industry, which I knew nothing about prior to this point, was my first year of pharmacy school. I got really involved in IPHO and AMCP, which allowed me to explore these career routes and kind of obtain valuable experiences throughout. And then in my fourth year of pharmacy school, I actually was able to get a rotation with Eli Lilly and learned a lot about the pharmaceutical industry as a whole, but also regulatory affairs, which is a little more of the legal side of the pharmacy world. And that wasn't of interest to me, which really solidified me with that medical affairs internship, or medical affairs fellowship, sorry. And you can go to the next slide now. I now want to pivot and give you guys an overview of what kind of medical affairs is, what the evidence solutions team does, but really all departments across all companies within medical affairs do too. And Masara walked you guys through the clinical development process, which is kind of a good touching point to show you where the medical affairs team fits into the company and fits in with the research. Like Masara mentioned, she primarily focuses on that phase 1 and 3 research, and then some of the phase 4 research as well, that post-marketing surveillance. And medical affairs comes into play kind of in that late phase. So when you get into that phase 3 and phase 4, the medical affairs team starts playing a big role within the company, but also externally to providers and insurance companies. And what we do is we essentially not only play a role in post-market research, which I'll touch up on, but the primary role of the medical affairs team is to communicate all of the scientific and clinical information to internal stakeholders, so to the different departments within the company at AbbVie or within whatever company you're working for, but also to external stakeholders as well. So whether that could be at conferences, communicating it to providers and other healthcare providers and professionals, or whether it's working with insurances and communicating that scientific information and the evidence that we've got from our clinical trials to those payers to help get the products covered by the insurances, along with just to the patients. We do a lot of patient education, and we create a lot of education materials that go out to the patients. So the package insert, for instance, is something where the medical affairs team plays a lot in developing the content that goes on it and reporting that clinical data. And if you look at the right of the screen here, the little table or the chart that I made here, it just gives you a good little role, and I can walk you through these quickly to give you more insights as to what medical affairs does, because it's such a big department and there's so many smaller teams that do so many important pieces to the whole picture. I wanted to quickly highlight all of them. And one of them is to break it off quickly, is there's the global team and the US team. So the US team primarily focuses on just the US based research. So all of the post-market research and all of the operations that are around our particular drug that we're working on within the United States. And then of course, the global team works across the rest of the world. So they also can include some of the United States research as well. And then with that, there's the field teams, which I want to touch up on first, because it's a pretty explanatory role. And what they typically consist of are your medical science liaisons and your medical outcome science liaisons. And what these team members do is they're, like I said a moment ago, is they communicate that scientific and clinical information, but they're working directly with the doctors. So they're going to the doctors on a daily basis, traveling all the time to speak with these doctors about the clinical trials that we have ongoing and the data that we're generating with it, along with just the landscape of what's going on in practice. We're getting insights as the field team. They're getting insights that they can bring back to our team and help us design new trials to help fill gaps that the providers are seeing within current standards of care. A good example for this would be actually a project I'm working on right now. We have a particular cancer called myelofibrosis we're researching, and it's to support a product that we currently have. And we're running these studies right now, and our field team's actually working with the sites to fill evidence gaps. There's a lot of gaps in care right now, and we're trying to identify those gaps, because then we can position our drug, use the clinical data that we've developed with our drug the best we can to show that it can truly help these patients and treat these patients with this myelofibrosis cancer. And then to quickly touch up before I move on to the next slide, we have all the in-house teams as well. So there's strategy teams, and what the strategy teams do, it consists primarily of a lot of directors, and they discuss all of the current products we have. So once they're FDA approved, we discuss and assess all the current evidence gaps there are on the market. So what are providers wanting to see in our drug? What type of research can we get a new study on or run a clinical trial on to get evidence and get data to support their interests of making them feel more comfortable prescribing the product, whether it's for a particular population that our clinical development studies did not have enough data to support an accurate clinical decision-making by a provider, or whether it's a new indication as well. We also kind of explore some of those working with providers. And the provider information and working with those and getting doctors set up is the field team will work with those doctors, and they come back in-house and will execute something called an investigator initiated study, which is where the doctor will run the study and we just provide support for them to run that study. And they can do it with any idea. So if they want to research something that doesn't align with what we're looking to generate evidence for, they can execute on their own. And we just really support that and facilitate their research. And then we can utilize that research and communicate it to the rest of the medical world to help leverage our product and really kind of use evidence to support clinical decision making. And that's, in summary, kind of exactly what the medical affairs team does. And if you go to the next slide, I can outline a little bit more in depth with particularly at AbbVie. So you see these 5 buckets. I first wanted to touch up on AbbVie has multiple therapeutic areas, and medical affairs is cross-therapeutic, but there's therapeutic specific teams. So we work in oncology, immunology, eye care, neuroscience, and medical aesthetics. And then we also have a specialty product, a set of specialty products, which is working in HCV, some cardiovascular, anti-infectives, and gastrointestinal products. And so if you look at all of this here, it's kind of a pyramid, and the pipeline to practice is where that clinical development realm comes in, and then medical affairs builds off of that big foundation that the clinical development program did for us. So what Masara's team did. And as you see here, we provide that deep scientific and therapeutic healthcare system knowledge and communicate that globally to providers, to insurance companies, and internally to position ourselves best on the market with our product. And we collaborate with those doctors and with the scientific community, so other scientists or researchers, to enrich and enhance our product and gather more evidence and create a better picture and paint a better story for the products we have on our market. And that's where that evidence generation piece comes into play as well, because we deal with all of that post-market research that I mentioned and executing the smaller studies once the product's FDA approved to help fill gaps and make providers more comfortable prescribing our product, or make insurances cover our product on their formularies. And then just overall, that communication, I've touched up on that a lot, but solutions is once we have our product to market, that's not the end of that product. It's just the beginning. The medical affairs team is able to execute on all the rest of the stories that we can create with the product that clinical development has really built a great foundation for. And we just kind of execute and take it a step further and generate even more evidence and make our product more versatile and reach more patients to help more patients with their disease states. And you can go to the next slide now. So, and the last thing I just wanted to show quickly were some of the career opportunities and growth you can have within the medical affairs teams. I did just want to point out, I touched up on it earlier, there's so many different departments within medical affairs that they're basically big, massive teams on their own. And I wanted to break these down for you quickly and kind of give you a quick little career route on the way you can go to get into medical affairs if it interests you. And one of that first bucket is medical information, which is essentially the team that will take calls from doctors or patients and answer any clinical questions they have about our products. And they also provide written responses as well, and they can answer questions on forms and some other things, just anything scientific that is on label about our product. And how that role is, it typically requires a master's, PhD, PharmD, or MD, with at least 1 to 3 years of medical information experience. So that could be working, whether working as a medical writer or working with really any clinical experience. You can kind of get into that field as long as you have a few years of experience before breaking into medical information. And that's kind of the same route with scientific publications as well. I just wanted to kind of give a background with publications, and what they do is once we have all the data from our clinical trials, is this team is responsible for analyzing the data, but presenting it and creating posters and educational materials and journal publishings that go into large scholarly peer-reviewed journals, developing all the content and material that goes in there and making sure it's scientifically balanced and accurate, and coincides with everything that we had within our research and all the evidence that we generated with as well. And then the last two real quick are the medical affairs team, which I kind of just bucketed this as all the in-house medical affairs roles with those strategy teams and those therapeutic specific roles. And this is where it comes in a little bit more experience, is you can come in very early level, right after undergrad, as a clinical research associate. So you could work running clinical trials and working on clinical trials with, that could be a clinical research organization like MedPace or a couple other ones. And then from there, you can move into a pharmaceutical company and come in as a clinical research associate, work your way up to a project manager, and then kind of work your way up into different managerial positions and ultimately work your way up to a director. And most of that is really kind of dependent on the uniqueness of the team, because there's so many different things these teams do, and they're all therapeutic area specific. But then you have your field medical team, which is your medical science liaisons. And you come in as a medical science liaison. That's the entry level role for this particular team. And you need a PhD, PharmD, or MD, and you need at least 1 to 3 years of experience as an MSL or 5 years of experience in that particular therapeutic area. So you could be a clinical pharmacist or working as a doctor and then come in as an MSL. And then from there, once you get that 5 years of MSL experience, you then can work your way up into those leadership people leader roles, being a director of the field team, and then ultimately becoming a regional director and managing the directors across a whole region. So it could be the whole West Coast. And all of these, just to summarize, there's so many different opportunities within medical affairs that there's pretty much, if you have any interest within clinical research, there's definitely a team that could work for you within medical affairs. And we do so much unique and different things, and it's encompassing of so much cross-functional work and working with different teams and communicating that information. It's a really exciting team to be working on or working with. And then next slide, if there is one.
Yeah, and I think that will be the conclusion of the slides. So anyone have any questions for our guest speakers today? If not, I do actually have a question. So I was just wondering if all three of you could answer this. Is that if someone were to be interested in going into the industry, whether getting a PhD or PharmD or any master's or bachelor's degree, but wasn't really sure exactly which particular route they want to go, what is one advice that you will be giving to that person in terms of trying to find their path towards industry?
That's a good question. Mayan, do you want to start or do you want me to go ahead?
I think it's a bit hard to say it went from a PhD perspective, because they don't really teach you much about career development in graduate school, at least on the PhD side. You just kind of figure it out with no guidance or little guidance. And so like what we're trained for in PhD is to be academic researchers, but there's not enough spots like in all the universities in the world for new professors. And so we've been pivoting more to industry, and biotech is very much booming right now because of the pandemic. So at least from my perspective, I don't really know a great way of like getting a foot in the door in industry like while you're in graduate school. It's very different from the PharmD training, except to like always network as much as you can, like find people who know people in industry and establish those connections, because those connections will probably get you a job. And like that's what I'm finding out now as I'm like interviewing for jobs. So that's all for me.
I kind of echo that. I feel like networking is huge. You can start that early on too. If you guys have LinkedIn's, just kind of browse around, see who's working at pharmaceutical companies and blind reaching out to them. I've started to learn through doing that. 90% of the time, they're more than willing to have a discussion with you. And they actually like talking about themselves. They like telling you about their role, and you're building that connection. You're building a relationship that, like Mayan said, they can get you a job. Networking goes a huge way. But I guess to answer the question, I guess from a pharmacy perspective or a PharmD perspective, not knowing where to start, with you being an undergrad, begin looking, I guess, at the different medical professional schools you can go to. So the doctorate programs, that is something that really is an easier route to getting your foot in the door within industry and allowing you to grow within the industry. There's plenty of other routes in the industry that you can get in, but you're kind of capped at your growth without having that doctorate if you want to be more on that clinical side. And so if you really want to be involved in clinical research or on that medical side of the company, I would encourage you to explore a PhD, a PharmD, or an MD. And then from there, start trying to seek out internships with the company. Even I can't speak for like drug research or anything, but there's plenty of internships that they offer undergrads and then graduate level students as well. So when you're in a pharmacy curriculum, seek out those pharmaceutical industry internships and really try to leverage the experiences you have to get those internships, because they're difficult to get. But if you can get one of those, that's pretty much your foot in the door there. One of those on your resume is something that really kind of gets you into this fellowship route and can even get you into an entry level role. But that's kind of my advice from a PharmD perspective.
I can chime in here too. I definitely agree with Austin and Maya. And in terms of, networking is key. If you find someone with a title of a job that you're interested in, then just message them and see if you can set up some time with them and they can tell you about what they do day to day. I think that's very important. For me, going through undergrad and even pharmacy school, it was really hard to envision the job that I would end up with. Eventually, I mostly focused on the academia part, just getting through classes, making sure I, complete my degree. And that's why I felt a little bit crushed once I got to pharmacy school, because I just didn't know what I was going to do at the end of it. And so I think doing internships is helpful, networking with people, really starting early on to see what kind of job you want to do every single day. That's really important. And even during my gap year, I remember I applied, just with a bachelor's degree to a few biotech companies that had just entry jobs. They were like running assays, really simple. I think these are great opportunities that, I definitely got calls back. So I know that they take entry positions, but, networking and trying to get internships if you can, which, when you're a student, it's really easy to get an internship. And once you're out of school, it can be a little bit harder. So just try to take advantage of these opportunities.
Thank you so much. And there's a question in the chat. Just could you please share more about the work as an MSL and the route to become one?
Yeah. So the work as an MSL, that's actually the career route I'm looking at pursuing post-fellowship. And what the MSL does is they basically build relationships with doctors in their territory. So they're assigned a territory, and they're basically regional-based territories. So for instance, the Southern California territory typically consists of Southern California, Hawaii, and then maybe Arizona or Nevada, somewhere a little bit more east of us. And what you do is you're responsible for working in a particular therapeutic area. And with that therapeutic area, if it's oncology, you're going to be working with all the oncologists in the area and building relationships with them. You're going to communicate all of the scientific information that we're getting through our clinical trials on our products, and you're going to be communicating that information to them. And over time, you learn what's valuable to them, and you really make those engagements very beneficial through communicating that information to them. But also a big value within the MSL is really understanding the current treatment landscape. So by building relationships with those doctors and being out in the field, you're seeing firsthand how they're approaching treatment within that particular disease state. And then you can take those insights back in-house and collaborate internally with the internal medical affairs teams and communicate that information and let them know that these providers are seeing this in the real world, and maybe point to where we can start another trial, or where we can fill some evidence gaps that the providers want to feel more comfortable providing the product or prescribing the product. And then another big role with the MSLs are working with them to execute on their own personal research. A lot of top doctors that we call key opinion leaders within the MSL career route, a lot of them do research. And through that, AbbVie as a company wants to sponsor that research. And that's where I spoke on earlier, that investigator initiated studies. We work with those doctors. If they have a really good idea, we'll bring that doctor in-house and have them present that idea to our internal committees and see if we can get a study working with them, seeing if it's something that works with us and that's data that we're looking at getting, and we run studies with them. And that helps you build those relationships and also helps you really understand the science behind the disease state you're working in. And I guess to touch up on the second part quickly, the route to becoming one, I would strongly encourage you to get a doctorate. So a PharmD, an MD, or a PhD. And once you get that, really kind of have some sort of therapeutic area in mind. Once you kind of get into that therapeutic area as an MSL, you're kind of stuck there because that's where your scientific expertise is. You are an expert in oncology if you're working in cancer, or you're an expert in depression if you're working in neuroscience and your products are depression. And once you really kind of have an interest of a therapeutic area and have that doctorate, you can then get a fellowship or get some industry-based experiences that allow you to leverage that scientific skills and communicating scientific information, because then you can go out and build relationship with doctors, and that's your foot in the door to getting that job, is once you have a little bit of that information or experience from a fellowship or from getting into the industry, you can then make a pivot into that field-based medical science liaison role.
All right, thank you. So I think that's all the time we have for question, unfortunately. So again, can we get a warm round of applause for all three of our guest speakers today? Just give me 1 second. Thank you. So I hope you guys learned a lot about the industry and the vast amount of opportunities that you can go ahead and try out for a career. And I hope you guys learned a lot. And we will have before we leave, we do have can Ethan, our historian, take a picture. So we encourage you to turn your cameras on if you feel comfortable. And yeah.
Thank you guys for turning on your cameras. I'll give you all just a couple more seconds. Gonna need to take 2 pictures because we got a bigger crowd today, so that's awesome. All right. Okay. I think we're good. Okay. On 3, 1, 2, 3, smile. Keep smiling, keep smiling, keep smiling. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much. So once again, thank you, Dr. Doe and Dr. Mullins and Dr. Isa for their wonderful presentation. And yeah, so this officially concludes the end of the general meeting. If you would like to join in for an after social with us with a fun game of Garlic Phone, feel free to continue to stay around here. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. We're happy to answer any questions you have. Ryan has our emails. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, likewise. Then Ryan, you're welcome to pass off my email to anyone who has questions or anything about medical affairs.
Same here. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.